All right, a top 10 at the end of the year, first one ever. Second time doing this, I want to make it short, so let's get this going. Number 10, I won't do honorable mentions or anything. This is my favorite books of the year. That's what they emotionally did to me, what they make me feel even a year later, right? These are the best of the best to me. Number 10 is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Fantastic book. It is a whole bunch of short stories tied together really well. And some of the short stories are a bit weaker. Some of them are some of the best stories I've ever read in my life. But as a cohesive package, I don't remember some of them being, don't remember them as well or think back on them fondly like the soldier or the poet. But the teacher and the priest, I remember back on all the time. And they make me feel emotions down the line. And it's just almost great, but it falls a little bit short because of the weakness of some of the stories. Number 9, The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. It's like a great modern fantasy. It does everything right. It's funny, it's gritty, but has a heart. It's not grimdark. It is fantastical. You don't know every facet of the magic system like a Brandon Sanderson-esque system. It's fantastical. It feels like a fairy tale made into a fantasy book, a modern fantasy book. I highly recommend it. Unique world, unique characters, unique everything. You just got to get into it, and it is great. Highly good. Maybe not great. Top tier fantasy though. 8 is Lonesome Dove, by Larry McMurtry, a Western that is possibly one of the best classic American written books of all, one of the best of all time. How do I say that? Who knows? But anyways, it's a Western. I don't enjoy Westerns. I did love the miniseries back in the day. Read it now, forgetting a lot of it, but read it however many months ago, and it captivated me, kept me on the dusty trail with the main characters, and you remember them, you remember their struggles, and I enjoyed every second of it. You had heartbreak, you had just absolute disappointment and that you're supposed to feel it, not in the book and what happened, but the way you can tell that you really care about these characters is that you really feel the heartbreak. You really celebrate with them when things go right, and it's a life-changing book in a lot of ways, and you might want to recheck some Westerns and look at the top Western classics after reading this book to see what else you're missing. Number 7, Pompeii. It is, if you love aqueducts like I do, if you love historical fiction like I do, then this is a perfect book. It's set in Rome, in the area around Pompeii before Vesuvius blasts. The characters don't know that, and what it is an aqueduct engineer comes down and has to, in the story, solve why the aqueducts are failing. And in that process, Vesuvius is about to blow up as well. And he doesn't know that, no one knows that, so it's a ticking time bomb and a mystery about what's happening with the aqueducts, what happened to the previous aqueduct, Aquarius, the guy who runs it, the guy's replacing, who your main character is. So there's mystery, political intrigue, there is so much going on here, all with a backdrop of Pompeii, as we all know it. And it is fantastic. I love this book. And I love aqueducts, and there's a lot of aqueduct engineering stuff going on in there too, which glued me to the page. Loved it. Number 6, Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. Pompeii's by Richard Harris. I think it's Richard Harris. I don't know. Anyways, Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman. It is the quintessential popcorn action adventure comedy flick, right? In a book. And I flew through it in half a day. Makes you laugh so many times. When anyone who reads it laughs like crazy. I laughed a lot, right? The humor in it is hilarious. The main characters, though, are what really get it through. Donut the Talking Cat and Carl. It is kind of sci-fi mixed with fantasy, since the dungeon itself is fantastical, set around a fantasy, but it's a sci-fi. You'll see why. The world ended, and now the remaining humans have to compete in a dungeon crawl. You don't know what that is. It is life or death. Please read it. You will laugh and you will just blast through this book. Absolutely blast through it. I'm very, very deep in the series now. It's not all the way out, but I'm like in book 6, and they get better. They really, like, this one's great and it's one of the top, but some of the later ones are better, like book 5 is just amazing. However, this intro into the series is fantastic and it really sticks in the mind a lot clearer than some of the other ones. Number 5 is Sailing to Sarantium by Guy Gavriel Kay. The best living writer that I've read is Guy Gavriel Kay. And he writes fantasy, so that's just a huge plus. The writing is beautiful, the prose is beautiful, the story is sublime. It's set in a world that's like a point in time, because that's what Guy Gavriel Kay does. He picks a point in time and a place in time, and then he puts a fantastical spin on it. It's just a turn of the clock a little bit to make it fantastical. And if you love that time period, you get extra out of it. If you don't, it just is new, it's fantastical. But it is very rooted in our world in a lot of ways. So you get a nice halfway point. So he's very accessible to historical fiction readers and fantasy readers. The characters themselves are great. They don't reach the levels of a Michael R. Fletcher or of a, even a Joe Abercrombie, which I'm not a huge fan of, but his characters are strong, admittedly, right? They don't reach those levels, but of, let's say, uniqueness, but they are incredibly strong. They are better than most writers that you'll read, the characters and the strengths of the characters in these books. But they don't, let's say, reach that high. But what carries it along are the great stories, the superb writing, and the mystical feelings and the themes, the deep, deep themes that you get. With Sailing in Sarantium, you get a deep religious themes, very deep religious themes. Both the Sarantine Mosaic, both books, this is the first of them, you get very deep religious themes here, where it's not like hitting you over the head with, you must believe these things. It's more like, it's very questioning of the religious stuff in this book. And I don't want to go any more deeper into that because that is a highlight of the book, a huge highlight. And please read it. If you want to find a new fantasy writer who is solid, that's Guy Gavriel Kay. Anyone who's read him loves him. Beyond, no, not that one. I have my list out of order. That was number 5. Number 4 is Song for Arbonne, which is, again, Guy Gavriel Kay. This is the 3rd book I've read by him. A perfect fantasy. This is one book, not like the Sarantine Mosaic, which is 2 books, and because it's 2 books, it goes overly long in some places and misses out. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect duo. This book is only 1 book, and it is perfect. Perfect length, perfect character work, perfect world, perfect everything. It is just fantastic. You cannot go wrong with Song for Arbonne. It's got a very musical poetry heavy focus on like the world that you're in. You're in France at a certain time, but it's not France. It's a fantastical France. There is less magic, I'd say, in this than in the Sarantine Mosaic, in Sailing for Sarantium, but it is stronger character work in Song for Arbonne, and it is a political drama with a lot of family drama as well, and that is really what hits home with the book is the political machinations and the family drama. You can't go wrong with Guy Gavriel Kay, and Song for Arbonne is a stronger entry, being a singular package, and being let's say a more like a classic fantasy, and just does what it tries to do perfectly. If I'm to recommend a fantasy book of any kind to anyone, definitely what I'm first thinking of is Song for Arbonne. Absolutely perfect book. Now, number 3 is going to be The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell. Now, this is technically historical fiction. I think of as the books go on, especially book 3 in the Warlord Chronicles, the trilogy, I think that's a fantasy. However, this first book, Winter King, is heavily, heavily, heavily historical fiction in that the mystical, fantastical things that happen in this book you can explain them away. You can definitely explain them away. Now, that's not why I'm like saying this is the best book in the series. I think it is. No, the second book is the best in the series, sorry. Why I'm picking the first book though is it is the best one in where you feel like you're thrown into the mind of a early Dark Ages Britain as their world is coming into contact with foreigners and is falling to the foreigners. It's the King Arthur tale, so you get King Arthur realistic while being in the eyes and the mind of one of his soon-to-be companions while he grows up in this strange, mystical pagan world. And the beliefs are strange, how it's written is great, and you fully understand the strangeness, and you just feel transported there. It's well written, beautifully written, not like a Guy Gavriel Kay, but maybe just a little bit less flair, less polish, but it is great. And just that time machine aspect will really blow your socks off. It blows everyone's socks off who reads this. But I think the second book, right, I think which is Enemy of God, is a better book. But just like all three books are great. The second book is just a little bit better than the first one. But the first one it's a great entry point, so please read it. But maybe the second book is better and maybe should have been on the list, but the first one is a great entry anyways. All right, number 2 is Beyond Redemption by Michael R. Fletcher. Whoa, just read it. This is the latest. This is the last book that I finished. It is the last one to be on the list. Like all the other ones I've read, not as recent, not even close to as recent as a lot of other books, but this one has definitely jumped to the top, very close to the top, because of how unique it is and how I think perfect it is. You cannot get better than this book in fantasy. You just can't. And other than obviously Tolkien, right? But as of all these books that I've read recently in the last 5 years in fantasy, new books, this is better than all of them. And I say that because it is a new crazy world that you really have to get used to, a la Dune, right? Where you're thrown in and you spend 100 pages trying to wrap your head around it. But once you do, it's fantastic. That's this book. So prepare for that. Then you also have the Joe Abercrombie characters, but done to me better. I love them because you have Joe Abercrombie's characters are great, but there's no redeeming factors or redeeming anything about them. Or if they do, then they fall off a cliff and then now I've lost them as characters. I don't like them. These, every moment of them is hilarious. They're talking to each other and having a hilarious time, but they're also extremely witty, grimy, gritty, real, and the way they talk is real. Now, you also have the villains, which are just mind-blowingly weird and strange and great, and the story itself is strange. How the magic in this world is fueled by insanity, and the way the reality works is that if a crazy person believes something crazy and believes it strong enough and has other people believe it, then that belief becomes manifest. And that's why it's called Manifest Delusion Trilogy, right? But it will blow your socks off on how absolutely unique, absolutely just, it's horror. It's a horror book. It's a horror fantasy, honestly. Body horror weirdness. And there's nothing else like it that I've ever read. And it is a perfect fantasy. I would not recommend it to everyone, though, because it is so strange. Number 1 is Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. Now, it is a huge book, a long book, but it flows great. It is historical fiction, by the way, early Middle Ages, and it is a cathedral being built in what is it called? I forget the name of the town, but you're watching a cathedral get built brick by brick basically, and you are really rooting for the characters to get this to work. They need to get their footing. They need to get this cathedral built, and the villains who try to stop it will make you so angry, and you cheer for the heroes, you yell at the villains, and you feel every bit of it. And the story is just so perfectly paced. It is a huge book. The emotions are so deep, are so vivid, and I couldn't not put it as the first one because of how strong an entire package it is. I do recommend all of these books. Please give them a shot. Have a good one.